Welcome again today to the Top Series, where we look at some untapped features within our partner ecosystem. And today we're joined with Matt Balser from SentinelOne. Afternoon, Matt. Pleasure to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome. The goal is really to focus in on the endpoint, right? Protect your endpoint and resolve with greater speed, scale, and accuracy. Let's get to the agenda, and we'll demonstrate what we're going to be showcasing here today on the call. So the agenda and why you should stick with us for the next 30 minutes. Our main focus is quickly why MDR, EDR. Second point we're going to tackle is the difference between endpoint detection response and legacy antivirus. Then we'll drive into the Singularity for endpoint demo and end with some FAQs, any questions in the chat. To be moderating the chat via LinkedIn. So if there's any questions, feel free to ask your questions and we'll try to answer them at the end of the call. So stay tuned for the next 30 minutes and Matt will drive us through why SentinelOne is the leader in this space. So why MDR, Matt? So it is a requirement, right? We see today it is a requirement from cyber insurance companies. Legacy antivirus is no longer sufficient, and we're looking at more advanced malware detection, network traffic detection, and really endpoint detection and response. Is this something that you're seeing in the industry?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of like how a car insurer wants you to have brakes on your car, right? They don't want to pay for a lot of accidents. So now the insurers are saying, if you want to get cyber insurance with us, we need you to have a minimum amount of protection that we feel suffices and will prevent us from having to constantly have to pay, cyber ransom and things like that. So we're definitely seeing this. We've seen it in the public sector, certainly, Quebec education, Ontario education now have both been handed the requirement to have cyber insurance. And in both cases, the cyber insurers came back and said, you must have EDR/MDR if you cannot manage it yourself. So definitely what we're seeing across the board nationwide.
Awesome. And we'll move on to the next slide. So when we talk about today, we're going to be focusing in on endpoint, really. But we hear a lot in the industry the key catchphrase or the key term, zero trust pillars. Can you just maybe drive us through that and help the audience understand we are focusing on the endpoint today, but there are different pillars that we need to focus in on?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're going to see, and when I demonstrate our solution, you'll see how we're moving towards this, what the buzz around this XDR. And you're right, it does start to extend the protection into these other pillars. So certainly, as far as SentinelOne goes, we were born as an endpoint company. And then as more and more of our customers moved their compute and their workloads into the cloud, that certainly became a big focus for us. And then over the last year, we've really started to look at identity and the network because, if we can apply the same principles we've had at the endpoint and on workloads and in the cloud to the things we see on the identity side of the house of that posture and on the network side of the house, well, then we're giving more visibility, more automated remediation, more automated response, which just makes it easier to defend your organization. We still believe that the endpoint is the last wall. It is what the hackers are after, but chances are they're going to have to go, across your network and compromise your identity to get there.
Well said. Well said, right? So there are different silos that you need to really protect against in order to protect the entirety, right? To achieve cyber resilience. And when we talk about XDR, the X in XDR, what does that stand for,
It's
Matt?
actually, yeah, it's funny that they put it as an X, but it stands for extended. So the word actually starts with E, but then they would have had to use the same three letters. So it does stand for extended, and basically it just means pushing that posture beyond the endpoint, and pushing that visibility and that D and that R, that detection and response capability beyond just the endpoint into the other parts of your IT environment.
And another question. So if you had to find why um, your solution is in 30 words or less, or in 50 words or less, why your solution, how it prevails, or why it's better than legacy antivirus. What do you do different in your solution?
So I think if we start from the endpoint and what makes us different than antivirus, the simple thing is we are not looking at reputation. We are looking at behavior, and we're looking at how a system is behaving. And most importantly, our biggest difference is our response capabilities. They can be automated or they can be on click. And it's really our ability to restore a system back to its pre-attack state without having to reimage, without having to rely on a backup that's probably been compromised. It's really our ability to automate and bring systems back online in their pre-attack state without much effort.
Very good, very good. Well said. And when we talk about managing the endpoints, right? A lot of the concern, or a lot of the concern from customers when I'm speaking to is in regards to, you have all these endpoints being protected, and there's a whole bunch of alarms being presented in the dashboard. Alert fatigue is key, is probably the number one driver for change. Has that been addressed with SentinelOne at all in your console?
Absolutely. So one of the driving technologies in our solution is something we call Storyline. And what Storyline does is primarily two things. One, as we ingest data from your endpoint, we correlate the events and we tag the data so that we can piece the story together. And what that does on the back end, once you get some alerts, is it pieces the event together. So you're not getting, as an example, when you run a really complex attack, 100 alerts for one event. That's all one story, and our Storyline technology puts that together. So you get less alerts that are more complete and more correlated with our technology.
Awesome, awesome, great point. So, you went through the drilling period. So let's get down into the demo. I'll allow you to share your screen, and you could drive us through the Singularity for endpoints and showcase really why you shine, and why it makes there is a difference versus legacy antivirus. So here we go. We will close this guy and bring guy up. Awesome. I think we see your screen now.
Perfect. So this is our SentinelOne console. You're currently seeing it in dark mode. We have dark and light mode. Not that that's the most important thing, but just for preference, that's what it is. So this is actually our alert screen. We call it an incident screen. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually launch an attack on a domain and actually show you, one, how quickly an attack can move across the domain, and two, how quickly our agent picks it up. And then I'll show you some tricks on how we can actually restore the domain back to its pre-attack state and bring the machines back as if they were never hit, and also some of the other XDR features that we currently have. So that said, I'll bring up a couple of virtual machines here. So on the left side of your screen, you should see the domain controller. It's the one with the big green glowing cube. And then on the right side of your screen, you just see another workstation in that domain, and it's the sort of the red background screen here. So what's happened here is the domain has been compromised. There's been some credentials stolen, and the domain's been compromised, and they've managed to get some ransomware on here. Now, they haven't been able to harvest all the credentials for the entire domain, but they're going to run a type of ransomware that quickly moves laterally across the domain. So you can actually see the ransomware start to run on the left side here on the domain controller. And you can actually see one of the interesting things that hackers sometimes do. They'll put delays in the execution. What this often does is it starts to confuse the protection, right? Something started, but it's not doing any damage. So some of the behavior models tend to forget it. So it does this on purpose, and then it starts to try and reach out across the domain. You can see it actually is able to reach out across, and now the same ransomware is running on all the machines in the domain. But you can actually see we've started to catch it. Now, I've purposely put our agent in a detect only mode so I can show you some of the feature set. So it's actually going to allow this ransomware attack to run. You can already see this. The machine on the left side is completely compromised. The background is gone and all the files are encrypted. You're going to see the same thing happen shortly on the right side. And so that machine will become compromised too. So, in this case, we're only talking about two machines, the domain controller and one other machine. But you can imagine this in a real life scenario where there's thousands of machines connected here, and we'd be in some trouble. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, as you see, the one on the right side get encrypted. I'm actually going to reduce these back down, and we're going to go back to our SentinelOne console because the alerts have already started to roll in. So
Matt, before you continue, just a quick question. We see, like you said, detect only mode, and we see a lot of alerts popping up at the end user. So we could imagine that's the end user. Is that configurable? Will the user see all that interaction, or can it happen in the background?
Yeah, it all depends. We have a lot of customers who really want their users to be aware that something bad has started to happen, and maybe control that behavior. Maybe they'll make a different decision, close their browser, not go to that website, kill an application or something like that. They don't really need to because the agent will start to do that work itself. But some companies do want their users to have that notification. On the other hand, there are some companies that they don't want the fear to be in the user. They don't want them to be concerned with any of that. They want them to behave as normal. And so, yes, you can absolutely control those notifications, and decide what you want your end user to see and what you don't want them to. Absolutely.
Perfect.
Yeah. So as you can see, the alerts came in here and it correlated all the alerts into one event stream. So even though I can see it started with this obscure file on the one domain controller and started to spread, it's compiled all these alerts together. Now, I'm going to show you, when I click on one of these alerts, of course, we give you different indicators ourselves and we tell you what has happened. But more importantly, if I click here, here's some of that XDR functionality that we're so proud of actually right now. Is I've integrated this with my Zscaler, I've integrated this with my Okta, and so it's giving me more context as to what happened. This wasn't just a ransomware attack. I can actually see that based on the Okta data I'm getting here, that there was an identity compromise, because I can see that this user started to log in from several different locations. In fact, they're currently logged in from both Michigan and Russia. I don't know about most people. I haven't figured out teleportation, so I don't know how to do that. So this is what we call an impossible traveler situation, which tells me that this user's been compromised and that their user is being used in multiple locations. So what we can do here is twofold. I'm going to take care of the ransomware event in a second. But before that, I want to reduce my risk. And knowing that this user has been compromised, I want to stop that. So we're not just correlating data here. We're correlating detection and response, right? That's the whole point of XDR. So I click on my XDR actions, and I can actually take actions in Okta. So I can suspend the user, I can clear their session, and I can force them to reset their password. If I look at Zscaler, where I saw that they are a full system admin, I can actually now remove them from that type of access and put them in a restricted group. I click apply and it's going to send those actions to the other solutions. So I haven't had to change interface here. I haven't had to go hunting in Okta. From the event IT and SentinelOne, I'm able to take those actions. Now, we still have machines that are compromised here. So we're going to take care of those. I'm going to tag this entire stream, and I'm going to take our unique mitigation actions. So I mentioned when you asked me, Ernesto, what sort of makes us unique, and these are the actions that make us unique. It's the way that our agent is able to respond and remediate a malicious event on an endpoint. So in this case, we've had lots of modification happen to the systems. We've had files get encrypted, backdrops be changed, users compromised. They've probably changed permissions. So I need to correct all that. I'm not going to start going and re-imaging 1,000 machines.
Right.
I'm actually just going to click our 4 actions. So kill and quarantine, nothing different there. This is what antivirus has done forever. What's different is our remediate and rollback. The remediate will actually correct all the system changes. So if you think about what a typical malicious event changes on a system, they'll change registry, they'll change permissions, as I mentioned, they'll schedule tasks, they might make modifications to network privilege and things like that. So I want to restore all those pre-attack system changes. The second part is, in this case, we've had a bunch of files get compromised. Ransomware comes in a lot of forms these days. I've seen, the standard encryptionware, but I've also seen deletionware, corruptionware, and
Right.
in some cases, they're replacing files with other files that look like the ones that you thought were there, but in this case, they're actually just more malicious activity that they leave behind, so that when you restore the machine, you just end up re-encrypting or re-corrupting your system. So the rollback will take care of that file activity. It's going to restore all the files back to their pre-attack state, and so the system will be good to go. So I'm going to click on those actions. We're going to follow sort of a security operations methodology here, mark it as resolved, confirm a true positive. If I was a team of security operation workers or analysts, I might put some notes in here for the team, but in this case, I'll save that step and we'll just click apply. Now I'm going to bring up those two encrypted machines one more time so we can watch this happen live.
And this in the background, it's using Microsoft VSS to call the
Yeah,
machine to be able to roll back.
So our technology, our rollback technology, is using the Microsoft VSS snapshots. So what that allows us to do is we add two pieces of technology over the normal VSS, because of course we know hackers are pretty smart. They know that Microsoft has built this in, and so what they'll do is they'll run a delete all shadows quiet command.
For
Our
sure.
technology actually intercepts that command and keeps the VSS intact, and at the same time, it is also tagging all the files, so we know which VSS to go back and get them from. So you can actually see the machine on the right is restarting. Unfortunately, VMware wasn't my friend on the domain controller, and it sort of shut that one down. But that one should come back to a restore. It'll receive its remediate and rollback commands, even though it shut down in the middle there. It's still going to get those commands and be able to restore. So it should
So
come back.
one of the key actions that I like to take away maybe from this is not only do you get visibility into the attack itself, the ability to roll back the speed, but again now I am a little more about that X in front of DR, right? So
Mhm.
XDR integration, that communication, interoperability between third-party platforms that'll really enrich the data in your console. So making it your single pane of glass to either visualize and be able to react and remediate against those threats. So really like no.
Correct. Yeah. So we've realized that it's not so much just about protecting the endpoint, restoring the things on the endpoint. You've mentioned a couple times, resilience. That is the key. We have to get back to a resilient point post attack. And if all we do is restore backups, find the files, and things like that, we're not back to a resilient point. Resiliency means I no longer have that risk in my environment. I'm no longer compromised. So if that user is still compromised, it doesn't matter that I restore the
Right.
endpoints. I need to get back to a point where my environment is safe. That user can continue to operate with a normal behavior without having to worry that they're about to take down their entire domain.
Well said. Well said. And here we can see that the threats are marked as resolved, right?
Yeah, it's starting to resolve them. I might have to reboot these. But yeah, so you can actually see not only does it resolve them and roll back the files and such, but it's also killing and quarantining, and at the same time, it's actually tracking all the actions that it takes. So, as an example, if you ever were to get audited on any of the remediation you did, and they said, well, you had a ransomware event. It seems like you were able to restore the machines, but how do we know for sure that the systems were restored, the files are back, and that this compromise is over, and that no sensitive data has left the building? Well, if I can go back to these audit trails, I can actually see that. So I'm just going to launch these commands one last time because it doesn't seem that VMware was rebooting the machines, but we'll take care of that. So yeah, so it actually not only restores and does the work of remediation, it actually gives you that audit trail, the information, and you can continue to hunt, and have visibility to what actually happened. Because even in these events, if I click on my Explore tab, I can actually see how the attacks played out. So beyond just seeing the basic data here, I actually get to an understanding of what happened, how it happened, and how it's all been fixed. So I'm hearing a lot of restore actions happening in the background here, and you can actually now see my domain controller's back, my system is back. They both want to be rebooted because there's been so many changes to the system that they want to, restart with what we call a clean process clock. So total normal activity. It's just going to require one more reboot, and these users are back as they were. Now, if I had had my agent in a full protect mode, it would have been a little bit different behavior. It actually would have been correcting all the actions as they happened instead of after the fact. After the fact is not as elegant as we would like, and certainly we wouldn't want any disruption for our users. So in a real life scenario, I would have had my agent in what we call protect mode, and it would have taken all the actions I forced it to take by clicking on them automatically without any interaction. In fact,
along with the roadmap,
yeah,
Matt.
yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. So it would have done the rollback, it would have done the remediate, it would have restored the systems, it would have done all of this without me having to touch anything.
And one thing that pops out, it is a different council. It is a separate council. You do need some level of expertise really to leverage the council and use the council and understand these mitigation strategies. So a lot of organizations, they struggle, and when talking to them, they're struggling with manpower, lack of manpower, lack of expertise, right? So is there any form of, I know some of the other competitors, they talk about augmented SOC. Is
Yeah.
that something that's available with SentinelOne?
Absolutely. And you've hit the nail on the head. This is definitely the biggest issue we are seeing in security right now. Every customer that asks me, what's our biggest risk right now? I said, your lack of resources.
Right.
And so, yes, one of the key elements we're offering to customers right now is what we call our vigilance service. Our vigilance service is essentially a bunch of professional SOC workers that work for SentinelOne that will actually be monitoring your console like they work for you. In fact, we've got a bunch of Canadian customers, and in fact, a high percentage of our Canadian customers use this service. And I actually had great feedback from one last Christmas. When you get a call from a customer on Christmas morning, it's typically bad news. In this case, it was actually really good news. The customer was actually calling me to remind me that he was taking his first vacation in 3 years because our vigilance team was actually watching the gate for him. So it is an issue, and it's an issue we can solve with a high level of expertise and probably at a much lower cost point than most people expect. It comes in a lot less expensive than actually hiring a professional security analyst to work for you.
Absolutely.
And you're getting a team of SOC workers behind the window.
Right, because it is a 24/7 concern, right? It's not an 8x5 concern, it's a 24/7 concern. So if you think of the difficulty it would take to bring on a SOC team for a mid-sized organization or a small organization to be able to manage and protect, having that augmented SOC I see as a real differentiator compared to legacy antivirus and compared to growing that team within your organization. So great and excellent value add. So back to the demo. Is there, we see it redeemated, it rebooted?
Yeah.
Any other activity that you want to showcase?
No, that's it. So we're the systems are back up and running. I have my audit trail. If I need to investigate further, I can. If I even wanted to pivot and see, are there any other systems that have maybe seen similar? All I have to do is click on this storyline. It'll actually take the entire event, allow me to hunt off it. But my systems are restored. I've actually also taken care of the two sort of risk points I saw based on the user being compromised because the actions were taken in Okta and Zscaler. So my environment is now back to resiliency, and I'm comfortable to move on. And if I ever get questioned on it again, I've got my audit trail.
So again, I have one more question, Matt. I love questions. If you go back to the previous screen,
Yep.
I noticed the note section. So
Yeah.
as you mentioned, the vigilance service and response, is it a is it another third party tool, or they would integrate into your console in this specific section?
So the vigilance team actually works directly in your console. So when they take action, you're going to see it here in the notes section. They're going to explain to you what they saw, what actions they took, and if it's ever an event that's serious enough, not only are they going to put all the information for you here in your console, so you don't have to look anywhere else, they'll also notify you that maybe there's some other changes that need to occur in your environment. But for the most part, you're never going to have to leave your SentinelOne console. They'll be taking care of it. They'll be putting in context and notes for you, and doing the hunting on your behalf. So all
Awesome.
the information will be there at your fingertips.
Fantastic. So thank you so much for the demo. Really gave good visibility into Sentinel-1 and how it works and what makes it different, right? So we definitely hit on those key points we want to hit on in the agenda. So that's great. So appreciate the time, Matt. We'll take some time just to go over some key takeaways, really what makes a difference and what we saw today that allows you to protect better with dynamic device discovery, be able to dynamically discover the endpoints in your environment, allows you to get greater visibility and accountability and rapid response and time to value. I think those were the key takeaways from this presentation and this demo. Great job doing that, Matt. So for the next untapped feature, November 24th, Matt, I'll let you highlight what's on the agenda on November 24th.
I'm actually you're gonna have to remind me, Ernesto.
I'm gonna have to remind you. Yeah, absolutely. So we're gonna be talking about identity protection with Singularity, identity
Yes.
active directory.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, so one of the features we've expanded in our solution in the last 6 months is really that focus on that one trust pillar, the identity one. So we're not hiding it. We made an acquisition of one of the leaders in the space, and we know that it's a problem that every single customer has. We've already done evaluations for lots of customers, and not one has passed yet. So we can help you look at your AD. We can help you look at where your risk points are, and then also put monitors in place so that we can detect when there are some compromises of identity, and even put some deception in place if you feel that you're a highly targeted environment. So yeah, we'll be talking about that on the 24th, and going over some of the key features there.
That's perfect. Like we mentioned today, the topic today of the conversation is about endpoint, but in order to get that really cyber resilience and zero trust, right? It's all about protecting the endpoint, protecting the workload, focusing on identity protection and then network protection. So look forward to working with you on identity protection with for Active Directory on the 24th and drive through that demo and show our users, our customers, and organizations how they can help protect identity with Singularity platform. Thanks again, Matt. Greatly
Perfect.
appreciate it.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
your time.
Thank you.
Have a good rest of the day.
You too.